What was Ilhan Omar's effect on politics this past week? That's what we're going to be discussing right now. But first, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and subscribe to me on all the other social media. I'll also remind you at the end. There's also another thing I want you guys to do. Vote on this straw poll. Once again, a straw poll for the Thunderdome debate that will probably be happening next week, meaning next week. Okay, today is Sunday, so next week. And we have Alex and Soon, who have both been on the channel and who hate the fuck out of each other, which is great. So you have these 5 options here. You can vote for multiple options, but you only get one vote per option. So please be aware of that. And please vote in the poll. And if you don't vote in the poll, fuck you. Anyway, Ilhan Omar is pissing a lot of people off. I've personally tried not to make too many videos on this because I think people are basically virtue signaling a lot in this. The people who support her are virtue signaling that, well, we're progressive, we believe in free speech, when they never believe in free speech in any other case. And the people opposing her are often they're actually against free speech too. So I think it's kind of a hypocritical situation. Do I support her position? I think she's full of crap, and you'll see soon that she is kind of full of crap in a different way. But yeah, I think she can say whatever she wants. I think that I've made the case in a previous video about her that she takes money from plenty of other PACs. AIPAC doesn't directly give to political candidates, by the way. AIPAC kind of serves as kind of a seal of approval for certain voters who want to vote for a pro-Israel candidate, and for certain donors that want to know who to donate to if they are pro-Israel. It is a fact. You could not like it. You can have a problem with it. I personally am not a fan of AIPAC either. And I think that there's plenty of reasons to criticize it and criticize the foreign aid relationship. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. So let's hear some of the remarks of Ted Deutsch, Florida Democrat, about this.
More today about the pending resolution dealing with anti-Semitism from Florida Congressman Ted Deutsch, speaking on the House floor.
Mr. Speaker, today should not be about politics. I didn't rise to be political. This is personal. A few years ago, I was invited to speak at the UN General Assembly special session on anti-Semitism. I told the representatives from the assembled countries that anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine, that if there is anti-Semitism in your country, there is hatred that will ultimately permeate throughout society if it is not checked. I never thought I would need to explain that to my colleagues. This is not political. No one should make it political. The use of anti-Semitic language and images can never be tolerated. When a presidential campaign runs a commercial alleging a Jewish global conspiracy in an ad featuring George Soros, Lloyd Blankfein, and Janet Yellen, it is invoking classic anti-Semitic tropes, and it must be condemned. And when the same campaign tweets an image of their opponent featuring a Jewish star and piles of money, it does the same thing, and it must be condemned. And when one of our colleagues accuses Soros, Steyer, and Bloomberg of buying the election, it also invokes classic anti-Semitism. That must be condemned. And when one of our colleagues invokes the classic anti-Semitic tropes, the anti-Semitic language, that Jews control the world, that Jews care only about money, that Jews cannot be loyal Americans if they also support Israel, this too must be condemned. We have the opportunity to condemn all of that, by all of them, intolerable as it all is, by passing a strong condemnation of anti-Semitism. My colleagues, because of anti-Semitism over millennia, millions of Jews have been hated, targeted, expelled from their countries, violently attacked, killed, and exterminated.
Okay, so I don't think that necessarily everything he's saying is incorrect, but what he's doing here is trying to make the case that if we don't condemn anti-Semitism here, it's basically going to run buck wild, and it's going to change people into these horrible bigots and everything. Look, I'm Jewish. I get remarks or I used to get remarks much more often when I was in college that were, very, very defamatory to me because I was Jewish. And I certainly don't like to be mischaracterized and attacked or whatever. But the reasons that I see that anti-Semitism is rising, so to speak, today in certain ways, okay, I wouldn't say across the board, is because of people like Ted Deutsch who have spent the past 3 or 4 years condemning everybody that disagrees with them politically as some sort of bigot and a Nazi. Okay, and it doesn't have anything to do with Ilhan Omar. They've been saying this for years, and now you're seeing children getting written up for having Nazi emojis in their screen names. You see children who, and I'll try to feature these on the video, but you're seeing some children who are being caught having beer pong parties that the beer pong cups are in swastika shapes. Why do you think that they started doing that? It's because people are talking about Nazis all the time now. It's almost as if the Nazis are the greatest topic of conversation there is. So of course you're going to have people who are going to gravitate toward it because people are now obsessed with it because politicians can't stop talking about Nazis, 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 Nazis. And here is, by the way, this is why I will not stand with Ted Deutsch, because I think he's not sincere. Here we go.
How many strikes does a channel get?
Typically, a channel gets 3 strikes, and then we terminate the channel.
A Slate article references a study by Jonathan Albright, director of the Tao Center for Digital Journalism at Columbia, who found 9,000 videos on YouTube with titles that are, and I quote, a mixture of shocking, vile, and promotional themes that include rape game jokes, shock reality, social experiments, celebrity pedophilia, false flag rants, and terror-related conspiracy theories dating back to the Oklahoma City attacks in 1995. Ms. Downs, does Google think that this is a problem, and what is the solution that you're coming up with to address it?
So to be clear, what he's saying is absolutely abhorrent. There are credible theories that certain people were involved in the Oklahoma City bombing that were never brought into account. And for him to claim that this is problematic and people shouldn't talk about it on YouTube that's the position of a despicable person.
In terms of conspiracy theory content generally, our goal is to promote authoritative content to our users. So we have 2 principles that guide the way here. That's the first one, is we want to provide users with authoritative, trustworthy information.
Downs, I'm sorry to cut you off. I only have a minute and a half, and I don't really need to hear what you're trying to provide. I want to know how you're dealing with all these conspiracy theorists on your platform.
So the first way is by demoting low-quality content and promoting more authoritative content, and the second is...
So they're basically putting their thumb on the scale for people they agree with and basically sandbagging the people that they disagree with.
By providing more transparency for users. So we're introducing boxes that provide factual information at the top of results that have shown themselves to turn up a lot of information that is counterfactual, such as searching for the earth is flat on YouTube, where you see a lot of...
Your response is to put a box saying, nope, the earth is not flat.
Correct.
Okay. I have a question, Ms. Bickert, for you. You recently decided not to ban InfoWars. Can you explain that decision? And do you use a strikes model like YouTube?
Congressman, we do use a strikes model. What that means is if a page or a profile or a group is posting content and some of that violates our policies, we always remove the violating posts at a certain point, and it depends on the nature of the content that is violating our policies. At a certain point, we would also remove the page or the profile or the group at issue.
So the question is, how many strikes does a conspiracy theorist who attacks grieving parents and student survivors of mass shootings get? How many strikes are they entitled to before they can no longer post those kinds of horrific attacks?
I want to be very clear that allegations that survivors of a tragedy like Parkland are crisis actors, that violates our policy, and we remove that content. And we would continue to remove any violations from the InfoWars page. If they posted sufficient content that it violated our threshold, the page would come down. That threshold varies depending on the severity of different types of violations.
Thank you.
So there you go. Ted Deutsch wants to censor people. It doesn't matter to me whether he wants to censor InfoWars or even somebody that I hate like Ilhan Omar. Ted Deutsch can go to hell. And that's why I'm not going to pay more attention than I need to this. But you still have to talk about the effect of the Ilhan Omar situation. Now, there's a lot of people who have been posting how what's been going on kind of makes them want to leave the Democratic Party. Most of these people do come from the Jewish community. I don't know how many of these people were actually going to vote Democrat before, but I'd have to assume that a few will, but it's not really significant enough of a number of people to sway any election in particular, except maybe in a few states like New Jersey, New York, and probably Florida. But in any case, what's happening with Ilhan Omar is that she's exposing extremely unsightly rifts within the Democratic Party. Okay, and if you think that this is something that's just a passing phase, you don't know what you're talking about. There is an older Democratic Party that is generally more amenable to the defense establishment, and they are willing to go along with certain goals of the defense industry or whatever. And there's another wing of the Democratic Party that's extremely anti-war, that's extremely pro-open borders, and they're in favor of abolishing ICE, and they're in favor of a lot of other economic policies that would be considered far left in the United States, maybe not in Europe, but in the United States. So that fissure is happening, and you don't have to, you can be on either side of the fissure, but to deny that it's happening is being deluded, being delusional. And Ilhan Omar apparently criticized Obama on Friday and said that he was a pretty face and that he had basically drone striked a bunch of people. So this is from the Daily Wire, which is, I don't really use the Daily Wire that often, but they do have a more complete account of this. So, most of the relevant stuff is here. So Tim Alberta, who is a reporter for Politico, quoted Ilhan Omar saying that Barack Obama was a murderer for the droning of countries around the world, and that just because someone is more polished than President Donald Trump doesn't excuse their bad policies. After the article was published, Omar claimed her quote was taken out of context, so she uploaded audio of the interview. The full context proved Politico's Tim Alberta quoted her accurately. Alberta wrote the following paragraph regarding his conversation with Omar regarding Obama. As she saw it, the party ostensibly committed to progressive values had become complicit in perpetuating the status quo. Omar says the hope and change offered by Barack Obama was a mirage, recalling the caging of kids at the U.S.-Mexico border and the droning of countries around the world on Obama's watch. She argues that the Democratic president operated within the same fundamentally broken framework as his Republican successor. Alberta then quotes Omar directly. We can't be only upset with Trump. His policies are bad, but many of the people who came before him also had really bad policies. They just were more polished than he was, Omar says. And that's not what we should be looking for anymore. We don't want anybody to get away with murder because they are polished. We want to recognize the actual policies that are behind the pretty face and the smile. So I think it's a reasonable thing to ask for. Okay, if I may play to Omar's side, yes, that's true. If you're advocating for policies that people like Omar would disagree with, why should she go along with it? Omar pushed back against Alberta's reporting, sharing her dismay on Twitter. Exhibit A of how reporters distort words. I'm an Obama fan. I was saying how President Trump is different from Obama and why we should focus on policy, not politics, Omar said in a now deleted tweet. She also posted audio of her interview, which completely backed up Alberta's reporting. So it says here, I will talk about the family separation or caging of kids, and people will point out that this was Trump. This was Obama. I'll say something about the droning of countries around the world, and people will say that was Obama, and all of that is very true, Omar said in her own recording. we can't be only upset with Trump because he's not a politician who tells us his policies in the most perfect ways. His policies are bad, but many of the people who came before him also had really bad policies. They just were more polished than he was, and that's not what we should be looking for anymore. Omar went on to say, we don't want anybody to get away with murder because they are polished. We want to recognize the actual policies are behind the pretty face and the smile so that we can understand the kind of negative impact or positive impact they will have on us for generations to come. Alberta then took it to his own Twitter account to respond to Omar. Exhibit A of how politicians use the media as a straw man to avoid owning what they say, he tweeted. Your tape supports what I wrote 100%, so does my longer tape. It's beyond dispute. Next time a phone call from your office before the Twitter ambush would be appreciated, he added. Alberta then retweeted Huffington Post reporter Travis Waldron, who said, the weird thing about Omar taking issue with Politico's accurate and contextual quoting of her is that an honest reading of what she said really read not like a criticism of Obama necessarily, but of the American presidency and the limited framework in which it exists and is evaluated. So, look, I don't have the comments here, but I think that this shows Ilhan Omar for the person that she is. She's a person who's willing to step up and say something courageous, and then when people put it out there and it puts her at odds with the Democratic establishment, she throws out some sort of weak apology, and suddenly it becomes apparent that she's not really as brave as people think she is when it comes to things that are important enough. Attacking Barack Obama is a little different than attacking AIPAC. Okay, I think attacking AIPAC is kind of, there's ways to look at it. I personally am not a fan of AIPAC, and I'm not a fan of Ilhan Omar. Attacking Obama is something that will get you in trouble with the party, because Barack Obama remains a great fundraiser, a great figure, a great unifying person for the Democratic Party. And I think that when Ilhan Omar steps on that third rail, you're going to see a number of people within the Democratic establishment start to actively try to find a way to primary her in Minnesota. Will it work? I don't think so at the moment. I think that she's going to have enough of a high profile now and be able to fundraise off of this within her own community, within the Minnesota community, as long as she doesn't step on the toes of local Minnesota interests, such as some of the banking industries up there. She's not going to have a problem getting elected, especially not in a district in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, which is heavily Democratic. So what else is going on here? You have Ayanna Pressley and Elizabeth Warren both defending Ilhan Omar, saying branding criticism of Israel as automatically anti-Semitic has a chilling effect on our public discourse. And this is kind of, now Ayanna Pressley is a new congresswoman. Elizabeth Warren has previously been pretty pro-Israel in her voting record. And I would say that they are kind of treading a difficult path within the Democratic Party. You have to stop looking at this from a right or wrong perspective for a moment. Okay, you can have your opinions. I certainly have mine. I don't think that Israel-Palestine should be the major topic of elections. I served in the Israeli army. I don't think that the U.S.-Israel relationship should be paramount. I think that they need to establish their own their own boundaries and sort of let each country have its own determination of how much they support certain policies. For example, I think that the Israeli defense policy is unduly influenced by the United States, and I think that there's too much of a focus on Israel within the U.S. political establishment, within Congress, that is to say, and I think that we shouldn't be sending foreign aid to Israel, and that if they were more independent of foreign aid, there would probably be more benefits for both countries, and possibly even for the Palestinians. That being said, it says here, Omar has been repeatedly accused by both Democrats and Republicans of employing anti-Semitic stereotypes in her criticism of the United States' support for Israel amid the Middle Eastern countries' treatment of Palestinians. However, some progressives, like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, argue that allegations against Omar are bad faith arguments aimed at dividing Democrats and or stifling criticism of Israel's human rights record. In a statement Wednesday night, Warren said a democracy must be able to combat hateful ideologies while also allowing for a policy-focused debate about Middle Eastern policy. Branding criticism of Israel as automatically anti-Semitic has a chilling effect on our public discourse and makes it harder to achieve a peaceful solution between Israelis and Palestinians. The Massachusetts senator said, threats of violence like those made against Representative Omar are never acceptable. I don't know that anybody threatened her with violence. So, you know, if somebody knows of something, please let me know, because I don't think anybody threatened her with violence. Presley also stood up for her fellow squad member. In her own statement Wednesday, the 7th District Congresswoman denounced all forms of hatred and discrimination, including white supremacy, racism, transphobia, ableism, sexism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia. There is no hierarchy of hurt, she said. Presley joined Ocasio-Cortez and others, including Jewish progressives, who accused Omar's Republican critics of a double standard, given President Trump's past comments about Jews, minorities, and immigrants, as well as other prominent GOP elected officials accused of anti-Semitism. So this is going to be really a problem for the Democrats going forward, because Ocasio-Cortez is making she's making a mistake in terms of how she's interpreting this. It doesn't matter if people are trying to drive a wedge within the Democratic Party regarding criticism of Israel. That wedge already exists. There are certain members of the Democratic Party who are staunchly pro-Israel, who have gone and, you know, had a long-term relationship with either AIPAC or other lobbying organizations, and they're very supportive in both their statements and in their voting record, whether it's Bob Menendez or Debbie Wasserman Schultz or this Ted Deutsch dude and people like that. And those are people I don't support anyway, because if they don't have a good domestic policy, I don't care about their Israel policy. Now you also have people like Ocasio-Cortez and Barbara Lee and other people who are also, to some degree or another, critical of Israel. So that is already a rift. It is a division. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist. Whether you're Ocasio-Cortez or Nancy Pelosi, you have to acknowledge that there's a difference of opinion within the Democratic Party on this topic, and it has to be addressed in one way or another. And if this is the topic that splits the party, what really ties the party together? The Democratic Party is a big tent that includes too many different ideas that in many cases can't really agree with one another. It's not just with the Israel issue. On the economic issues, for example, a lot of these Democratic politicians pay lip service to Medicare for all and then vote against it. In other cases, they talk a lot about campaign finance reform, and then they end up taking money from super PACs. Then you see a lot of them are supporting teachers' unions while also, in many cases, supporting school choice. Cory Booker comes to mind. Now, I personally, I'm for school choice. Okay, I'm for, I'm against Medicare for all. I'm against a lot of these policies that the Democrats promote. That's why I'm not a Democrat. The Democrats who are part of the party and who will not support progressive policies, they are now having a spotlight shined on them by people like Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Presley and various other people at the state level. And that's really what's making them uncomfortable. And this Israel issue is one part of it. It's maybe the most visible part of it, but there's other stuff too. And that brings me to Mark Cuban. Now, we've already seen the announcement of a candidacy by Howard Schultz. And Howard Schultz's candidacy should already be worrying for the Democrats at the moment, okay? Because if they end up nominating a candidate who is progressive, very, very left-wing in terms of economics, foreign policy might be a little bit out there as well. You know, let's take, for example, Bernie Sanders. Okay, so they win the Democratic nomination. Then you see a lot of people who are moderate liberals, for example, like Howard Schultz, who will attract kind of this middle voter, okay, if they end up running. If Mark Cuban ends up running, it would probably be even more of a boost for that candidate, okay? Mark Cuban, I think, has more charisma than Howard Schultz, and he would probably garner a lot of support within the moderate Democratic wing of the party and detract from the progressive leadership. Okay, let's say, for example, that the Democrats end up nominating somebody like Joe Biden, who is very moderate, but would have to go for the progressive wing of the party and try to corral them into voting for him. That would still be a problem for the Democrats, because you're going to have a lot of progressive voters who will say, well, we got shafted in 2016. We're going to go now vote green, or we're not going to vote at all, and that could deliver another victory to Donald Trump as well. So the Democrats are in a horrible situation now. If they end up nominating a moderate, they lose a lot of the progressive voters, who are not that small of a voting block, and they still have to compete for the Trump voters. And in many cases, a lot of the people have already lost faith in the Obama machine, and as exhibited by the defeats of Obama pawns in Georgia and Florida. So they're at a very simple disadvantage there. There might be an even bigger disadvantage if they do nominate a progressive, because there are plenty of moderate Democrats that will simply jump ship and vote for somebody like Mark Cuban, because they're not going to want somebody like Bernie Sanders running for president, because they don't agree with his foreign policy agenda vis-a-vis Israel, or because they don't agree with his economic agenda with regards to Medicare for all and a number of other policies that are not necessarily the consensus among older Democrats. So that's about it. I want you guys again to vote in the straw poll. Vote, or go fuck yourself if you're not going to vote. And as always, please like, share, subscribe, and subscribe to me on Minds.com, as well as Gab, Facebook. Fuck Facebook. Never mind. Don't subscribe to me on Facebook. Subscribe to me on Gab, Minds, on BitChute. Definitely on BitChute. I also have another channel, Razor Ray Special Cuts. Sometimes I upload there, as well as SoundCloud. And have a good night.